He signed the papers without even looking her in the eyes. The pen scratched against the page like a knife tearing through her heart. One moment she was his wife, his partner, the woman who carried his child. The next, she was discarded, cast aside for someone who served him drinks at a bar. The chandelier above their heads glimmered with cruel light as though mocking her. She stood in silence, her trembling hand resting over her stomach, protecting the fragile life growing inside her, while the man she once believed to be her forever walked away with coldness in his eyes. Before we dive into the story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of life's unexpected turns, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support helps us spread more powerful stories like this one. She had loved him when he was nothing. That was the cruelest part. When he was still clawing his way up the corporate ladder, when his bank account couldn't afford the suits he pretended to wear with pride, she was the one who believed in him. She cooked when money was scarce, comforted him when failure loomed, and celebrated with him when he triumphed. She had given him her youth, her loyalty, her devotion, only to discover that the moment he became powerful, the moment he turned into the billionaire he had dreamed of being, his heart no longer had room for her. He left her for someone he barely knew, someone whose laughter was loud and shallow, someone who shone only because she was reflected in the glow of his wealth. And while the world saw him as the ultimate success story, the devoted husband turned mogul, she knew the truth. He was a man who had forgotten where he came from, a man who traded gold for glitter. In the weeks that followed, her world collapsed. The mansion became too large, too empty. The nights stretched endlessly with silence, and the baby's small kicks inside her belly reminded her of everything she had lost. She had no family nearby, no one to lean on, because she had followed him to this city, leaving behind the life she once knew. Now, abandoned, she faced the daunting future of raising a child alone. But life has a strange way of revealing truths when hearts are shattered. One day, as she sat quietly at her desk, staring at the faded photograph of her late father, memories washed over her like a storm. He had always told her, in his gentle yet commanding voice, "One day, my daughter, you will understand the legacy you carry. Don't forget who you are, even if the world forgets you." For years she had tucked away that legacy, refusing to embrace the vast empire her family had built. She wanted love for herself, not for her wealth. She wanted a man who chose her, not her inheritance. That's why she had never revealed the truth to the man she married, that she was the only heir to one of the world's largest diamond mining fortunes. She had wanted to be ordinary. But heartbreak has a way of waking something inside of us. When her father passed away, the company was left in trust until she came of age. She never touched it, never cared for the coldness of power or riches. But now, abandoned and pregnant, she realized that legacy was not a burden. It was her protection, her child's future, and her strength. So she returned. Not with bitterness, but with resolve. She traveled to her homeland, where the mines sparkled under the unforgiving sun, where generations of her family had carved beauty from the earth. She walked through the offices that still bore her father's portrait, and people whispered in awe, "The heiress has returned." She sat at the desk that once belonged to him, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her destiny settling on her shoulders. The months rolled by, and with every passing day, she transformed. No longer was she the abandoned wife mourning a man who betrayed her. She was a leader, a mother-to-be, a woman rediscovering her worth. She learned to run meetings, to make decisions, to inspire those who worked under her. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her belly grew, and so did her confidence. And when her baby was born, with eyes that reflected both strength and innocence, she knew she was living for something far greater than herself. Meanwhile, her ex-husband's life took a different turn. At first, the world applauded him for his bold new love. Cameras flashed, magazines praised his daring move, and he bathed in attention. But as months passed, the facade cracked. The bartender who once seemed exciting grew tired of the billionaire's controlling ways. Rumors of arguments and scandals filled the tabloids. Investors began to question his decisions, his empire trembled, and the man who once stood on top of the world found himself sinking into quicksand of his own making. The day he learned the truth was the day he lost everything. He sat in his office, scanning the financial reports that revealed a new giant had entered the market. The diamond mining empire, one of the most powerful industries in the world, had a new face leading it, and to his horror, it was hers. The wife he had abandoned. The woman he had dismissed as weak and disposable was now stronger than ever, not just in wealth but in influence, grace, and respect. He tried to reach her. He sent letters, flowers, messages. He begged for meetings, even approached mutual acquaintances, hoping for a chance to explain, to return, to undo what could never be undone. But she had no time for the past. She was too busy building a life for her child, too busy stepping into the power she had once denied herself. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't need to humiliate him. The greatest revenge was simply her existence, radiant, unshaken, triumphant. Years later, their paths crossed unexpectedly at a charity gala. He was thinner, older, and broken by regrets. She was regal, standing tall in an evening gown that shimmered like starlight, her son's small hand tucked into hers. People turned to look at her, whispers filling the room about the heiress who carried herself with grace that money could never buy. Their eyes met across the hall, and for a fleeting second, the man who once discarded her realized the truth. He had traded diamonds for glass. She smiled, not with cruelty, but with peace. For she had long since let go of hatred. She had learned that some betrayals are blessings in disguise, that sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the only way to discover who you truly are. And as she walked away, her child's laughter echoing in the air, she knew she was free. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these powerful stories alive. Speech balloon special request. Comment below, do you believe karma always comes back around? We'd love to hear your thoughts. He signed the papers without hesitation, his hand steady, his face unreadable. To him, it was just ink on paper. A final stroke that severed vows spoken with trembling voices years ago. But to her, every scrape of the pen was a knife slashing through flesh, leaving wounds that would take years to heal. She stood across the table in the sterile lawyer's office, her hand resting protectively over the small swell of her belly, her eyes wide and unblinking, silently pleading for him to look at her, to see her, to remember who she was. But he didn't. He closed the folder, adjusted his designer watch, and walked out the door without so much as a backward glance. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her as the sound of his footsteps faded. She pressed her palm against her stomach and whispered to the child growing within her, a promise through trembling lips, "I won't let us fall apart. I won't let them break us." Yet her heart was breaking, piece by piece, as the love of her life walked away into the arms of another woman. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the beauty of life's unexpected turns, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support helps us continue spreading stories that touch the soul. The cruelty was not in the divorce alone, but in the betrayal that accompanied it. He hadn't left her because they had grown apart, or because their love had withered with time. No, he had left her for someone else, someone who laughed too loudly at his jokes, someone who draped herself over him at the bar as if he were a prize to be claimed. She had seen the photos splashed across magazines and gossip websites. Her husband, the self-made billionaire, parading the bartender-turned-girlfriend like a trophy. And the world had applauded, calling it romance, calling it fate. But she knew better. She knew the truth of the man she had once loved, the one who had arrived at her tiny apartment years ago with nothing but dreams in his eyes and holes in his shoes. She had fed him, encouraged him, stood beside him when the world called him foolish. She had stitched together his ambition with her quiet faith, believing that one day they would build a life worth cherishing. And now, that same man had thrown her aside like yesterday's newspaper, too eager to bask in the superficial glow of admiration from strangers. The mansion they once shared became unbearable after his departure. Its echoing hallways mocked her loneliness, the portraits of their smiling faces hung like ghosts she could not banish. Nights stretched endlessly, each one colder than the last, and the baby's small kicks in her belly reminded her of everything she had lost: love, security, partnership. She lay awake, tears soaking her pillow, whispering prayers into the silence, wondering how she would face a future alone. But in the midst of despair, something stirred. It came in the form of memory, her father's deep voice, warm and commanding, echoing from years past. "One day, my daughter, you will understand the legacy you carry. Don't forget who you are, even if the world forgets you." Her father had been a titan in his own right, though not in the glittering skyscrapers of the city. His empire had been built in the heart of the earth, in the unforgiving lands where diamonds slept beneath layers of rock and soil. He had built a fortune not only from wealth but from resilience, from generations who had given blood and sweat for something lasting. And when he passed, he left it all to her, his only child, his beloved daughter. But she had walked away from it. She hadn't wanted a life defined by riches or titles. She wanted love, pure and untainted, a man who would choose her for her soul rather than her inheritance. And so she had never told her husband about her true identity. She had wanted to be ordinary, to love and be loved without question. Yet heartbreak has a way of forcing open closed doors. Alone, abandoned, and pregnant, she realized her father's words were not a burden but a lifeline. She had forgotten who she was. But it wasn't too late to remember. She returned home, to the land where her family's mind sparkled beneath the burning sun, where her father's portrait still hung in the office that now belonged to her. She arrived not as a broken woman, but as an heir reclaiming her destiny. People whispered in awe as she walked through the corridors, "The heiress has returned." The men who once bowed before her father now looked to her with cautious respect, wondering if she had the strength to lead. And she did. At first, she faltered, uncertain of the complex decisions and heavy responsibilities. But as the weeks turned into months, she found her rhythm. She learned to run board meetings, to weigh risks, to inspire those who labored in the mines. She discovered that strength had always lived within her, waiting for the moment she would call upon it. And as her belly grew with the promise of new life, so too did her confidence. She was not only surviving, she was thriving. When her child was born, the world shifted. Cradling her baby in her arms, she felt a surge of love so fierce it washed away the last remnants of sorrow. No betrayal could touch her now. She was living for something greater than herself, for the tiny heartbeat that had kept her alive through the darkest nights. Meanwhile, her ex-husband's empire began to crack. At first, the world celebrated his new love story, cameras flashing as he flaunted his girlfriend on red carpets and magazine covers. But the applause was shallow, and it didn't last. Investors grew uneasy with his reckless decisions. Scandals erupted as his personal life bled into business. The bartender who once seemed exciting grew restless under the weight of his arrogance. Rumors of fights and betrayals swirled, and soon, the empire he had built on ambition and charm began to crumble beneath him. And then came the final blow, the rise of a new giant in the global market. The diamond industry, once dormant under old leadership, had been revived by a new figurehead. Headlines buzzed with her name, her story, her elegance. The abandoned wife had returned as the heiress of a diamond fortune, commanding respect not just with wealth but with vision and grace. The day he saw her face on the cover of a business magazine was the day he realized the depth of his mistake. She hadn't just survived without him, she had risen higher than he had ever dreamed. And while he scrambled to salvage his empire, she stood untouchable, radiant in her strength. He tried to reach her. Letters, flowers, desperate pleas through mutual acquaintances, anything to undo what could not be undone. But she had no time for the past. She was too busy shaping the future for her child, too busy living a life of purpose and dignity. Revenge wasn't necessary. Her very existence was proof enough of his folly. Years later, fate crossed their paths again at a charity gala. He arrived gaunt, worn, a shadow of the man who once ruled boardrooms. She entered radiant, dressed in a gown that shimmered like starlight, her son's small hand nestled in hers. The room hushed as she walked, all eyes turning to the heiress who carried herself with grace that money could never manufacture. Their eyes met across the hall, and for a fleeting second, he saw what he had thrown away. He had traded diamonds for glass, eternity for temporary thrills. She smiled, not with cruelty, but with peace. For she had moved on. She had built a life rooted in love, strength, and resilience. And as she walked away, her child's laughter echoing through the air, she knew she was free. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support means the world to us and helps keep these powerful stories alive. Speech balloon special request. Comment below, do you believe karma always comes back around? We would love to hear your thoughts and experiences.